If war were to break out, the true victims would be ordinary people on both sides, not the generals or politicians. Whether it is inflation and joblessness at home or the fear of bombs and boots on the ground abroad, this is a high-stakes gamble in which the rulers play, but the masses lose. Let's find out why Indian government and Pakistani Army need a war. For the Pakistani Army, stirring up threats from India can rally the population behind the military and distract from domestic failures. Pakistan today is mired in economic crisis. Inflation is sky-high, and external debt exceeds $130 billion, with IMF-imposed austerity fueling hardship. Human Rights Watch notes that Pakistan faced one of the worst economic crises in its history, as poverty, inflation, and unemployment soared. When people are hungry and jobs are scarce, the generals have a political incentive to blame an external enemy. A conflict narrative can unite disparate groups, justify increased military spending even amid collapse, and shield the army's own mismanagement from public anger. Inside Pakistan's power structure, the army controls vast business empires alongside its troops. Analysts describe Pakistan's military as a state within a state whose commercial ventures, cement factories, real estate, banking, consumer goods, pump billions into military-run trusts. Foundations like the Fauji Foundation and Army Welfare Trust own housing developments, factories, and utilities. These enterprises thrive under an atmosphere of tension. In a war or emergency, generals can channel state contracts and budgets into their own companies, while ordinary sectors starve. In past crises, the military secured resources and contracts while civilian sectors starved, and a war with India would likely amplify this pattern, with defense budgets soaring and army-affiliated businesses profiting from supplies and reconstruction. In short, conflict keeps the army both powerful and profitable, even as the country sinks economically. Pakistan is also riven by political unrest. The ousting of former Prime Minister Imran Khan in 2022 set off waves of protests. In May 2023, his arrest on corruption charges triggered nationwide demonstrations. His supporters openly blamed the army for orchestrating their leader's downfall. The government invoked Article 245 of the Constitution, deploying troops in Islamabad to suppress the protests. These internal crises, angry crowds in the streets, fractious coalitions, fragile coalitions, are a headache for the army's legitimacy. By shifting attention to an enemy at the border, the generals can cast themselves as Pakistan's defenders rather than its problem. In parallel, Pakistan's military and state-controlled media push a narrative of perpetual Indian threat. Social media campaigns after incidents like the April 2025 Pahalgam attack were filled with misinformation. Even state spokespersons posted sensational claims. Militant groups aligned with the army remind ordinary Pakistanis of past conflicts. The army chief publicly fires anti-India rhetoric in rallies. All this propels a mood of urgency. The narrative insists Pakistan must answer any perceived Indian provocation to avoid appearing weak. Internationally, Pakistan protests that it seeks peace, but domestically the drumbeat is clear. Under pressure to respond, the military may find it politically impossible to back down even as its economy flounders. In this way, the army uses the specter of war to distract from inflation and unrest, while padding its power and profits. The Narendra Modi government and its Bharatiya Janata Party also have incentives to play the conflict card. A decade of BJP rule has been marked by rising Hindu nationalism and an emphasis on strength against Pakistan. Election campaigns often hinge on security. In the 2019 national elections, the BJP famously shifted its slogan from Vikas to national security as its call to arms. Even after winning a third term in 2024, Modi's mandate shrank significantly. Facing stubborn problems like unemployment and inflation, the government risks public dissatisfaction. Modi will have to address issues like unemployment, inflation, and economic disparities in coming years. A major challenge since 2023 saw little improvement in living standards. By contrast, focusing on a common enemy at the border unites the electorate along nationalist lines, deflecting criticism of these domestic woes. Modi's BJP now portrays itself as the protector of India's security. After every attack, the government responds with hawkish rhetoric and action. The Prime Minister quickly granted the armed forces full operational freedom to retaliate and even suspended key treaties like the Indus Waters Treaty. These bold moves play well with nationalist audiences. In televised speeches and newspaper headlines, the government promises to hunt down terrorists to the ends of the earth, echoing popular anger. Such language strengthens Modi's image as a decisive leader who keeps India safe, just as domestic discontents fade into the background. Meanwhile, India's defense and media lobbies benefit. Rising tensions justify larger arms budgets and contracts. India already spends heavily on weapons and has become one of the world's largest arms importers. Authorities have funneled billions into domestic arms manufacturing and exports. A conflict with Pakistan would only amplify this, since New Delhi could claim any purchases are needed for national defense. Similarly, much of India's private and state-run media is sympathetic to the BJP's stance. In the heat of crisis, news channels and newspapers rally around the government line, often framing any disagreement as unpatriotic. Thus, a war narrative finds strong amplification on TV and social media, with few dissenting voices. If war were to break out, the true victims would be ordinary people on both sides, not the generals or politicians. Economies and societies would be devastated. Pakistan's already fragile economy would collapse, social services would vanish, and inflation would spike. War is a ravenous beast. Diverting funds to the military would gut public services already on life support. Hospitals already underfunded would be overwhelmed, healthcare for civilians would deteriorate, and millions of children could lose access to schooling. Fuel would go to the army first, leaving ordinary families in darkness. The Pakistani rupee would likely crash, driving up food and fuel prices to ruinous levels. In short, disaster for the poor. Imagine shopkeepers, farmers and wage laborers watching prices skyrocket while shortages bite. The effects would ripple beyond Pakistan. In Kashmir and border areas of India too, civilians would face martial law, curfews, and property seizures. Already after the April 2025 Pahalgam attack, Indian security forces razed the homes of several suspects in Kashmir collective punishments that embitter local communities and can spark cycles of violence. More broadly, any conflict will leave both nations permanently scarred. Even a limited war could undo decades of progress, dumping millions into poverty. Past flare-ups cost both stock markets and growth. The 2019 Pulwama crisis erased over $12 billion in market value in a week, and Pakistan's GDP growth fell sharply after the 1999 Kargil War. A new full-scale war could slice off 20% of India's GDP in just a month. Jobs would vanish, foreign investment would flee, and hyperinflation would sweep Pakistan. Millions of children, Indian and Pakistani, would go hungry as climate-shaken harvests suffer from water shortages. Basic medicines and utilities would be prioritized for the military, not the people. Soldiers themselves, many of whom come from poor backgrounds, would bear unimaginable burdens. Young conscripts from Punjab, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Rajasthan or Gujarat would be sent to fight and die in trenches. Families of the marginalized would lose their income earners. Every pilot, infantryman and sailor is someone's son or daughter. And in a nuclear-armed standoff the stakes are unthinkably higher. Doctors warn that even a limited nuclear exchange would cause famine and long-term health catastrophes on a regional scale. In the end, the game of war between Delhi and Rawalpindi has little to do with the poor farmer in Sindh or the shopkeeper in Uttar Pradesh. The Pakistani people risk becoming cannon fodder once more, their livelihood sacrificed in a geopolitical chess game that enriches the powerful. The same could be said for millions across the subcontinent. Ordinary citizens, minorities, students, laborers and soldiers will bear the weight of bloodshed, not the generals who stoke the conflict. Whether it is inflation and joblessness at home, or the fear of bombs and boots on the ground abroad, this is a high-stakes gamble in which the rulers play, but the masses lose.